Let's get started with our legislative candidate questions. So first question is similar to the first question for our last panel. Do you believe climate change is real, that it is primarily caused by human activities, and that it poses serious challenges for our county and state?
Yeah, so I absolutely believe climate change is real. You know, we've seen a lot of experts in a lot of different fields working on different projects. And I think oftentimes what happens is we'll have people with good intentions looking at things and making decisions and saying, well, this is a real problem, we need to address this, and they're right. And sometimes we'll have individuals that'll be looking at something and they'll say, well, if we change this a little bit here, we can actually make a little bit more money if we say this is attributed to this. You know, there's an action panel over in Europe, and I was, you know, kind of looking at their findings, and this one woman, she actually comes on stage and she says, I'm here, we manipulated the data to make money. And I thought, goodness, how are people supposed to trust their scientists if some of them act like that, you know what I mean? So I think an important part of seeing where all of it's coming from is paying attention to who is speaking, who has a microphone, and which scientists we're listening to. Some of them, we've been seeing drastic changes. Global temperatures have been going up, water levels have been rising, so it's all very important, and we really need to be paying attention to it.
I don't think there's any question if climate change is real. If you don't believe it, go ask a polar bear. What we're seeing in the Arctic, you know, I heard that they're actually planning to take cruise ships through the Arctic now around.
They've done it.
They have done it, yeah. And you know, you look at other signs. As Gary talked about, you know, Lawrence Lake used to freeze over. We don't see that anymore, and I just think that the signs are there. That 90% of the scientists in the world agree that climate change is real, and you know, we need to do our part to address it. A lot of people say, well, we're just Washington State. We can't solve the problem, which is true. But we can do our part, or we can do more than our part, and that's what we should do.
So I also absolutely believe it is real. I moved to Olympia 12 years ago to be Governor Gregoire's Director of Policy, and I came from Spokane. I have to tell you that there's a huge difference between Spokane and Olympia and how people feel about climate change and the actions they're willing to take. Here in Olympia, and I think part of it's because we live right on the gorgeous Puget Sound, so we actually see what ocean acidification, that's a hard word to say, I got it. We actually see the effects of that. So we not only read the data in scientific journals, we actually see what it does. I really wanted a grandchild. The conversation I had with my son and his wife was, we have got to do something about climate change because they don't want to bring a little person into a world that's not going to sustain human life. I promised them I would do everything I could to try to mitigate climate change. And now I have a 3-year-old grandson. So every time I look at him, he's kind of my reminder that when I get into that legislative seat, we damn well better pass some legislation that deals with carbon taxes, renewable energy, incentivizes companies and houses and apartments where people can't afford to change all the things that are going to keep their homes warm themselves. They're going to need some other incentives to do it. Landlords will need incentives to do it. So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about when I walk into that seat come January, and that little 3-year-old guy smiling at me is going to be in my head all the time, because that's really what it's about. And you here in Thurston County get it better than anybody I've ever seen. And I'm happy to be part of this group now. Thanks.
I think it's a complete and utter hoax.
Somebody, we do it all the time.
I did, yes. No, I think I know so many of you in this room. In the context of working on climate change, I've spent the last 10 years as the campaign director at Climate Solutions, a regional organization working on practical and profitable solutions to global warming. Part of the reason that I am running, I definitely want to be a climate champion in the legislature and get to work to solve this issue for our state and be a leader for the nation in what we can do right here in Washington. The first thing we need to do is stop digging the hole deeper. We need to stop building new fossil fuel infrastructure. That's coal ports, that's oil terminals, that's pipelines, that's natural gas facilities. The second thing that we need to do is we need to bring on 100% renewable energy, dig deep into energy efficiency, and really invest in storage so that we can have reliable energy. And I'm ready to take it on and see what we can do in the legislature together.
So the second question is, and I think one or two of you already kind of have led into some of this a little bit, reducing our carbon emissions will require many efforts across many industries statewide. What are one or two specific statewide ideas that you believe would have the most bang for the buck in reducing emissions?
The
And let's
biggest
start-
thing, well, I think the biggest thing would be to pass Governor Inslee's carbon plan, carbon tax. And, you know, to actually get in and do that. We've worked on it hard in the House, and hopefully we're gonna make some changes in the Senate, and we can get some of that done. You know, we have done some things that don't get a lot of attention. For instance, I don't know if you know it, but on the roof of the House, of this legislative building, the Capitol building, we have solar panels up there. We produce our own electricity for a lot of the legislative building. And what we used to call the motor pool, it is now called fleet services. Doesn't that sound a lot better? I don't know what percentage, but I'll bet you about 90% of the cars in the state motor pool are now, what do we want to call them? Hybrid, thank you. That's the word escaped me. But, and we have a few electric cars too, but the motor pool has gone almost exclusively to hybrid cars in part of our effort to reduce our carbon footprint.
If I-732 passes, which I hope it does, I think the legislature is gonna have a big role in kind of cleaning up some of the things that need to be cleaned up in I-732, the very things that have kind of kept some of the biggest environmentalists I know from supporting it. I mean, it needs some fixing. Whenever you pass big legislation, it needs some things to be fixed, and I think the legislature is gonna have to work on that. I think another thing is, you know, the legislature did a good job of working to shut down the coal mines. But I think now the next part of that is the UTC has actually got to approve rate hikes for PSE in order to get the money to actually do the work. So that's another kind of important thing that I think the legislature could end up getting involved in next session. And always we need more incentives to get people to go to cleaner, greener energy in their homes, in their apartments, in their businesses.
I think one of the biggest drivers in this state to bring clean energy online has been the renewable portfolio standard, which will expire in 2020. So a renewable portfolio standard requires that a certain percentage of your electricity portfolio is renewable energy. So we are facing a sunset on our voter-passed renewable portfolio standard, and the utilities are in line to meet those goals. And so I think it's time to start looking at what's the next renewable portfolio standard. And I think it's got to really drive at making sure that utilities are not turning to natural gas to replace that coal-fired electricity. And so structuring a renewable portfolio standard that basically says any new load will be met with clean green energy would be a great way to go. So that's something that I think we'll be seeing some work on. I think the other piece is the transportation sector is actually about 50% of our problem in this state because we do rely on carbon neutral, more or less carbon neutral hydropower. So lots of things that we can do in the transportation sector, but I think the biggest one is we really got to work on electrifying our vehicles and building a system where we can support electric vehicles, really incentivizing state fleets, city fleets, county fleets to move to electric vehicles. And you know, as the technology catches up with larger buses and that sort of thing, larger trucks, really providing incentives for them to go electric. And then of course there's land use planning and transit that we really need to build into making sure that our transit starts to see ratcheted down emissions.
Absolutely. So I honestly think the new technologies we're seeing are an extremely important part of making sure we have a clean climate, we have a clean environment around where we're living. Boeing recently was talking about fusion energy, which has zero byproducts that are harmful to the environment, and they're saying that within, I think it was within 10 years, they'd have this functioning to the point where we could be using it commercially. And if we get that in the bag, you know, Washington State has the second lowest carbon footprint nationwide, and if Boeing can really get that pushed out, I want to see that implemented. And zero emissions, zero negatives for the environment, and we would be having, it would be an incredible leap forward, so.
All right, last question. Solar energy is an important contributor to building a clean energy economy in our state, with potential to create more jobs, generate new economic activity, and save money. Current statewide production incentives for new solar installations are due to expire in 2020. Do you support extending, modifying, or eliminating these incentives? And explain your reasoning.
So I would support putting those incentives on steroids. Obviously, a big piece of solar energy is getting the right batteries to go with it. And a lot of you know Bob Gunther. You know that the whole Blue-Green Alliance are working hard on trying to bring manufacturing jobs to Washington State that will actually build the bigger batteries that can work with solar power to power homes, businesses, schools. It takes money, it takes incentivizing business to do that, and I think the legislature could play a big role in that. So I would absolutely support putting it on steroids.
I absolutely support extending the solar incentives. It's been a big battle for a couple of years now. It'd be nice to knock this one out this coming year. It will require Doug Erickson to not be the chair of the Senate Energy Committee. So even with the largest, I believe ITEC is the largest solar panel producer in the state. It is in his district, and he won't vote for solar incentives. He won't, yeah, so it's really a problem. I actually, I think that the current package, I think with the budget situation that we have, it's a pretty big hit on the budget, actually, the incentive package that we have right now. I think that the solar industry is in a different place than it was when we first passed the incentives. So I think that we could potentially ratchet down a little bit in terms of what I don't think it's just passing what we have right now to take place in 2020. I think we need to be really cognizant of where the industry has come and also the situation of the budget. I'm also a fairly big fan of the solar lease, third-party option, which is controversial with our solar installers right now. But I would love to work with them on that. I was looking for Kirk, because he installed the solar panels on top of my house, and so. But I think that would be a way for Washington State to really move into having a lot of solar panels go up rapidly, and of course there's lots of issues which we'd have to guard against in terms of shoddy workmanship, that sort of thing. But I think we could structure a package that would work well for third-party lease. So those are my two.
Are we lucky to have her and her expertise coming into this seat, or what?
Yes.
So this is where I get to kind of enjoy myself a little bit. I really love technology. I started programming when I was 5th grade, like 10 years old, so I really love getting into the nitty-gritty of the details. My older brother is a computer scientist who works for Oracle, and my grandfather is an engineer on the Alaska Marine Highway. And so looking at solar panels, it's really interesting technology, and it's extremely useful, but it's kind of it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It works really great in rural areas where you're a little bit further from the power grids, and it works really great along roadways, so you don't have to actually cut into the power grids and run power lines and that kind of thing. But the unfortunate thing is that it's not extremely cost-effective. So what I would like to do with a plan like that is to modify it. I'd like to look at other alternatives.
As Beth pointed out, there's a big brick wall that sort of stands right outside the Senate door, and kicks all that stuff aside. So, you know, if you don't think it's important who runs the show, just look at some of these things and see. And, you know, as I talked on solar earlier, I think this is a good opportunity. I think we need the incentives. I think we need to expand solar energy. I'm sort of intrigued at what some of the highways are doing in Germany, where they have solar panels along the highways as part of the highway grid that, you know, provides a barrier and also provides solar energy for Germany. And I think we can use spaces like that. And God knows what we've got in eastern Washington, you know, Moses Lake and Tri-Cities and places like that. We could do a lot more with solar energy.
Well, that is our questions. You all apparently were able to condense a lot of information into a much briefer time period than we anticipated. So congratulations on.
Short-winded politicians, what's wrong with us?
So we are actually ahead of schedule here tonight. And so I guess that means we have more time for questions from the audience.
So does anybody have any thoughts on how we can get solar or renewable energy to low-income people in our state?
I think one of the things that we can do is create incentives, especially incentives for landlords to do the right thing, or just homeowners in general. I think any time that we have excessive regulation for homes themselves when people are trying to buy homes, that relates to an added cost to the home. So there's just a lot of little things that we could do that would help. Just almost incrementally, like solving the global warming thing. A little bit, if everybody participates, it helps. Is it gonna solve it? Well, we don't know yet, but it helps. We all know it helps.
Energy, there are already programs in place that help low-income people do energy efficiency in their home. We need more of those. It's just such a win-win because you get help doing energy efficiency in your home and your utility bills go down. And you're putting fewer emissions into the air because of you're using less energy. So it's like win-win-win, right? So I think that, to me, that is the place where we need to spend the most money. And really, solar panels are this great shiny object, but the number one thing we need to do in our homes is make sure that they are as efficient as possible before we spend that money putting solar panels on the roof.
Along that line, I have a bright and shiny on my property too, and because I went efficient first, it's generating about over 90% of what I use.
That is awesome.
But my neighbor has 3 times the electricity bill I ever had in a house a third the size. And so I just took him some information about Thurston Energy, and you could get a home energy audit, and but he had no idea this was even a possibility. So how can we help the low-income people even know, from an education standpoint, even know that these options are available to them? How would we best do that?
Elsie's got an answer here.
Yes, I've got an answer. Sorry. Because it's exciting. I think this is a great conversation that we're having. This is so positive and just uplifting to me. But existing networks, right? That's something that the food bank, so I worked at the food bank for 2 years doing a fundraising campaign for them. One of the things that we worked on there was how do we bring people into the food bank to meet low-income folks where they already are and talk to them about the things that are going on. So I think we're lucky in this community that we have a pretty extraordinary nonprofit network and nonprofit sector. And so how do we plug those things together? And I think, for instance, PSE has gotten better about reaching out to folks like the food bank and the support center and places where low-income folks tend to congregate and talking about that. But that's the big thing with, the woman with the door. The story I told is she wasn't aware that there were programs out there to help her. And so that's, I think, the outreach that we have to keep doing. And I think rather than developing new ways to do it, we have to look at where do we already have those intersections and where can we bring in that expertise and make it as easy as possible. Because, this is a very savvy crowd, but low-income folks, for the most part, are struggling to just get by, right? Or really struggling. So how do we make it as easy as possible for them to benefit from these things. And I think that's the key, right, is working together with those organizations that are already interacting with the populations we want to reach.
Next question, right over here.
Yeah, a lot of people, especially well throughout the county, either use wood stoves or fireplaces, which contribute a lot to carbon emissions. How would we address either getting people to have more efficient wood stove, or are burn bans the solution? What about people that's their their primary source of heating?
Expand the wood stove buyout program. We only, the Clean Air Agency helps people in the city of Olympia transition their wood stove to now I forgot the name, the single units. The heat pump, or a ductless system, or a certified wood stove. And to be able to do that countywide, or even for the whole Olympic Peninsula, would have a dramatic ability to help, especially low-income families, because they're doing it without a lot of extra cost because of the credits they get. And so I think but we don't have very much money, and it doesn't go very far. And so that's a great opportunity where a little bit of money could help a lot of families.
Over 3/4 of the solar installs in California are leases. There's no upfront cash outlay. They maintain the system, and you save money on your energy bills. We should have that in Washington.
Is that a question for
One
one more?
Yeah, well, why can't we have that in Washington?
That's a third party. I talked about that a little bit in my answer about solar incentives. I'm a supporter of that.
That's
Of
what's
that
on
policy,
Amazon.
and I mean, it needs policy. We need to enable. It's enabling legislation, and we need to pass it. But it's been very controversial. It has the smaller installers have really organized to oppose that because of quality control concerns. So, yeah, we need to work out some sort of a deal with them.
The question is, can we require solar panels on new buildings?
The EECBG I talked about, a part of that also, that block grant, called for green codes, building codes. And the county commission is currently working on and amending the comprehensive plan when it comes to building code requirements. That's a work in progress currently as we speak. So whether that's, and the intent is to go greener and greener and greener, but to jump right to the solar panels and make it mandatory is exceptionally cost prohibitive as it is set up right now. But that is something that they've been seriously looking at and moving towards, and I would support that if we can afford it, that.
Maybe instead of mandating, we can go the other way and say, how do we make it easy and efficient to build really good buildings, right? As we see improvements in building codes and in green technology.
The technology is rapidly evolving. I think I've seen now we're about to have shingles, we're about to have siding, all that capture energy. And I think within the next decade, we'll be at a place where the affordability is a lot more reasonable. But I agree, at this point, we're probably not in a mandate place, but thinking about how we can build large community solar projects that will reduce our whole community's cost of power. Or one of the simple things we do in the city of Olympia is if you are going to build a LEED building, so my pediatrician, Dr. Lindgren, Healthy Futures Pediatrics, that he built a LEED silver building. And he did that because it was more economically efficient for him in the long run. But he told me the real cool thing, the coolest thing about it, was that it got him on the top of the permit pile at the city of Olympia. Like if you're building a LEED building, your building goes on top.
There's incentive.
There's an incentive.
This conversation, as in so many conversations about the climate, there are many wonderful ideas expressed. Everything is important, but I feel something is missing, and that is that climate change starts with me, and you, and you, and you, and all of us. And we who are more privileged use more resources than those who are poor and have holes in their door. And are we thinking about our lives and how we can ramp down and use less and use less? To all the candidates, do you think that's important to do? And if so, how would you weave it into what you try to get going in our county? And I don't think technology is a fix, because people run technology. And if people don't understand that we have to use less if we're going to have an habitable planet, technology isn't gonna save us.
Yeah. But for me, it comes back to how much plastic junk is in my house. You know, it's not renewable. And so how as friends and neighbors can we all urge each other to buy less plastic and be, you know, it's back to that, you know, when I'm thinking back when you said that to my mom teaching me I had to wash out the cans before I recycled. You know, so how do we teach every single child those little household steps? And it's
You're talking about buying less plastic, and I'm talking about buying
less, period, altogether. Yeah, we have to stop consuming or we're
Yeah.
not gonna get ahead of the curve. Absolutely.
So I'm gonna take, when I was in 5th grade, that was a long time ago, that was when all the anti-smoking stuff was coming up. And at that point in time, I was in a family where everybody smoked. But in school, they showed us pictures of lungs, they showed us all the data, and I have to tell you, I became this little anti-smoking booth in my house with my parents. I would throw cigarettes away, I would rip them up, I would throw temper tantrums, I would talk to them about them dying of lung cancer. Ultimately, my mom died of lung cancer. It was a very sad thing. She should have listened to her 5th grader at the time. But I do think the first place we start with educating all of us is our children in schools. It's not the only answer, but it is a huge piece, is educating our children of the necessity of doing just that.
Lori, I have to respectfully disagree with that. The reason is this. My career has been in education. It is immoral for us to punt this challenge to the next generation. By the time they grow up, it'll be too late if we are not educating adults at the same time as we're educating our youth.
Right, I absolutely agree. I
Thank
was
you.
not speaking to adults, that's just, the kid piece is one big piece of it. We need to educate everybody, I would agree 100%.
Just right.
We don't sometimes realize how much we do here in this community. And again, we set an example. You know, we have the recycle bin, we have the garbage bin, we have the compost bin, I have a little plastic thing that the city gives us for food waste. And, you know, that certainly helps us address some of the environmental problems. And it's all education and also having the people in the right place, in the right leadership positions to make sure that that happens. And, you know, I think that's what we're talking about in the legislature, is how we can push that rock up and over the hill instead of having it roll back down on us.
You know, in terms of turning off lights, building codes need to require that new houses are built with lights that go off as you leave the room. So we can educate all we want, our kids and our adults, but policy is really what is going to drive the systemic change that we need to make and how we provide energy. We can't live without energy. No one lives without energy. And we have these massive coal-fired power plants that we need to figure out how to pull offline and replace with different energy. And that is about policy.
Chris Rakedahl and Karen Fraser and I introduced legislation last year that at least got a hearing, but we're trying to set it in motion to allow for a vote, at least in northern Thurston County, on joining Sound Transit. I think that's one of the ways that we're going to address. Yes, it will cost more, but you know, we've got 2 Sound Transit buses that come down here now on a cooperative agreement. But to have Sound Transit end at DuPont and say, sorry, Thurston County, you know, we start planning now, it's still a 20-year process, but we need to keep that and push that in motion.
So I was raised to appreciate America, freedom. You know, to me, America is the place where Americans can be Americans, and it's all too easy for government to, well-meaning, to go too far and to kind of put locks on things that should be free and open. So to me, when we talk about passing legislation, I see that we should be responsible. We should be very careful with how our government puts into effect our policies and takes care of our environment. So as far as specific legislation goes, I think it has to be set on a case-by-case basis. You have to look at the individual problems and you have to address them case-by-case, business by business, and you have to really look at each individual situation.
I'm sure many people have heard the saying that the most efficient vehicle is the one you already own, or the most environmentally friendly vehicle is the one that you already own. And so I wonder if you have any ideas for how we develop more sort of cultural societal awareness around taking care of things as they get older and not necessarily buying new, even when the technology may have improved, but.
So I really love keeping cars kicking until they are as dead as a doornail. The one I'm driving here tonight, she's got a leak, 400,000 miles on her, and she's still making it. Learning auto mechanic skills. You know, you can keep a car going for a long time if you really know what you're doing. And if you don't, YouTube will teach you amazing things. I'm currently trying to replace, I blew a head gasket, so I'm taking the engine all the way apart and putting it back together with YouTube, because modern tools give you the ability to go light years ahead of what you used to be able to if you didn't know your way around.
Well, and I appreciate your point, and I built my first car, I think that's a great idea, but from a procurement standpoint, right, from a state, as the state is making decisions about how they're gonna spend money, there will always be a drive toward having things that look nice and neat and new and tidy and clean, and so how do we help demonstrate or model a cultural shift around?
Yeah, absolutely. I love conservatism. That is an excellent art to be getting at. But whenever we go to spend excessive money on any program, we really need to stop and look at that. So obviously that's going to be depending on who you elect and put in the legislature.
What about at the county level? What's the fleet like at the county level? Is it?
Well, I mean, we're not talking about the county.
If you remember, we used to have the motor pool cars that had the big sticker on the side that said, you know, state motor pool for official use only. I always wonder if there's a school bus that you don't use for official use. But we found out in a study that they did that those stickers damaged the paint. Sometimes they left a shadow, and it drastically reduced the price of the car when we went to trade it in. That's why you have the stickers on the windows now, rather than the big stickers on the door. And so there is a set plan of amortization, at which point it is beneficial to sell a car, what age it is, and what miles it has on it. And I don't know what those are, but.
Yeah, and Sam, even like the air conditioning and the radio and the electric windows, they add to the resale value of those vehicles as well, if you get rid of them at the right time, like you said.
The influx of climate refugees.
Well, I think you bring up a really important point that we haven't talked about very much tonight, and that's climate justice and how climate is impacting developing countries far more than they're going to, than it is impacting us, although we are being impacted with wildfires, our water supply is going to be smaller, et cetera, et cetera. But there are whole islands that have people on them that will disappear. So, you know, it's a very challenging issue, and I definitely don't think that the answer is to build a wall. I think that we have to, I don't think it is necessarily a state, you know, we can't really set policies here other than having a governor in terms of the Syrian crisis who, you know, said our doors are open. So, I mean, I think that that's the kind of thing that we need to have moving forward, is an openness and a recognition that this is going to have an impact in our, you know, for them, a very significant impact, and for us, you know, opening our doors and being part of the solution to, you know, what's ahead of us.
Let me, if I may, provide perhaps a bit of a clarification. I think climate refugees also might include folks from other parts of this country coming to Washington State. And so that's where I think it could well become a state issue, because we have a better survivability likelihood in this state than other states in the country.